Welcome, beautiful, to the Creating Change podcast with Emma Bradford. Creating change to fall back in love with ourselves and life. Each episode, I'll be offering insightful stories, concepts, and practical takeaways to inspire your day, reconnecting to the authentic essence within. Are you ready, lovely, to embrace yourself even more and awaken to the magic life has to offer? Let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Change with Emma Bradford. Thank you so much for being here, for being you, for joining me for this wonderful episode all about the sacred science of numbers. Now, I've done a couple of episodes on numerology already, and today we'll be exploring a different side of that. So really looking at each number. So in numerology, we focus on numbers 1 to 9, and people have a core number, what they call the life path number. This is the core energy that you hold, and I'm going to share a little bit more about each of those numbers in terms of the strengths and the weaknesses. I shared a little bit more in one of the previous episodes about this, about the numbers in general, though this one I wanted to dive into what is the strengths and the weaknesses of each number, and also what is the biggest lesson that each of those numbers need to learn in this lifetime. Like, what is the main lesson there? So this is something that we'll dive into today. Now, first of all, to uncover your core essence number, it's very simple. All you need to do is get the date of your birth. So this is the good thing about numerology. I mean, I've had different sessions with many different people, and quite a few people have come to me and said, oh, I really want to learn more. I've never been able to have an astrology session because I don't know the time of birth, like when I was actually born. They don't have that information. And this is the beauty of numerology. We don't need that. All we need is the day, the month, and the year, and then your full name if we do the full birth chart. Though for this particular podcast and for what we're going to talk about in this episode, all we need is the day, the month, and the year. And that's it. So when you were born, so whatever day that is. So for example, mine is the 5th of May. And then I have the year. You can guess my year. And then you can add it all up together. So if someone's born in 1986 or 1984 or 1992, like whatever date that is, you add up all the numbers. So the 5 plus the 5 plus the 1 plus the 9 plus the 8 plus the 2, for example. Add it all together and keep reducing it until you receive a single digit, unless it's 11, 22, 33, 44. Those are what we call master numbers, though those are a little bit more rare. And you reduce the numbers down. If you don't have any of those master numbers, you reduce it all down to one single digit. And then you get that number. And that is your core energy, your core life path number. So according to the work of Pythagoras and his students, every single number has a meaning, has a vibration, just like everything in this world, everything in this planet is made up of energy. And this is not some spiritual woo-woo nonsense. This is proven by science. So those of you who are a little more logically minded, you can have a little look at what science is telling you about how everything is made up of vibrating particles, space, energy, all of that. And this goes for everything. What we consume, the thoughts that we think, the emotions that we feel, words, numbers, all of this. So this is how numerology works. And I invite you to get curious. Get curious and just notice, I wonder, like once you figure out your number, what your core number is, your life path number, and listen to what I'm about to say for each number, get curious and explore, does that resonate for me? Is that true? Take what resonates and leave the rest. This goes for anything. So ultimately, your own knowing, your own intuition, what lies deep, deep within. That is the most important thing. And this is simply just an insightful, useful podcast that perhaps can shed light on some challenges and how to overcome those. So if you calculated number one is the independent leader. And the strengths of the number one people are extremely driven, very self-motivated, independent. They're natural born leaders, and they are very courageous. They step forward and create a new pathway for others to follow. Now, the shadow of that, so when the number one energy is not in balance, and perhaps there are a few things to work on, the shadow of that is that sometimes there can be the tendency to be a little bit aggressive, controlling, impatient, individualistic, and intolerant. So only focusing on the I and not really being tolerant or considerate of others. That can be the shadow. Now, the biggest lesson for the number one people are to really believe in themselves. Sometimes there can be a lot of self-doubts that arise. And when you're paving a new way for humanity, for yourself, for your community, it can feel a little bit lonely and a little bit scary at times to go forward where other people have not been. This is the path of the number one, is to really move forward in that way. So believe in yourself and lead the way forward. Now, of course, when I do numerology readings for clients, there are so many numbers. It's not just one number. So this core life path number essence, like this is just one aspect. So if you have a 1 and some of this might not resonate, that's totally okay, because there are many other numbers in your chart that would make up your unique blueprint, and each person is an individual with this. Though that can give a little bit of an insight of perhaps maybe there's something there to look at. Am I being considerate of other people? Am I also practicing patience? Am I learning to believe in myself? So if you calculated number two is the peacemaker. Number 2 strengths are bringing harmony to situations, to people, to relationships. Number 2 people are very intuitive, considerate, understanding, and supportive of others. Now, when this is out of balance, there can be the tendency in the shadow expression to be a little bit moody, hypersensitive, indecisive, not knowing what direction to go in or what to choose. There can be insecurities that come up or jealousy. Now, one of the biggest lessons for people who have the number 2 energy are to really let go of the people pleasing. Sometimes there's a tendency to focus too much on the other and want to please others in order for the peace. And it's remembering that actually the deepest peace and the most fulfilling peace is when you are at peace within too. And that team and we includes you also. So you are part of that picture. It's not just all about the other and keeping others happy. It's about you also being part of that and acknowledging your sensitivities also. If you calculated number 3 is the creative, expressive, and the strengths of the number 3 people are that they're very creative, very friendly, optimistic, great at communicating, and bring a sense of humor also into the interactions with other people. This is when that's in the light. Though the shadow expression of that is there can be the tendency to be a bit scattered, critical, unreliable, attention-seeking, melodramatic. Like sometimes there's a tendency to also gossip about other people. So that's when it's out of balance. And the biggest lesson for people with the number 3 energy are to really, really find out what is their truth and to express that. Self-expression is the most important thing for health and happiness. Expressing emotions, expressing your needs, expressing your truth, and finding a creative way to do that if that makes it easier. If you calculated number 4, number 4 are very practical people. So those who have number 4 in their chart, they're extremely practical. They're the builders of society. Strengths include being incredibly hardworking, organized, grounded, disciplined, and practical. Though when this is out of balance, there can be the tendency to be inflexible, stubborn, intolerant, pessimistic, and narrow-minded, like being very rigid about things. So it's important to open up the mindset and just make sure that are you seeing the bigger picture rather than only one thing or one problem or one area of focus. There's a wonderful image that can really help those that have number 4, and that's the image of the tree. Trees can be incredibly grounded. They're rooted in the ground, yet they are flexible. Their branches are able to move with the wind. So it's just remembering that, using those skills and being so practical and grounded and disciplined, though have flexibility within that too. If you calculated number 5 is the freedom seeker. And the strengths of the number 5 include being incredibly resourceful, multi-talented, sensual, a good communicator, and charismatic. And there can be that shadow side also when it's out of balance, and that is when there can be addictions or addictive behavior coming up, being unfocused, impulsive, restless, or persuasive. Now, one of the biggest lessons for those with number 5 is remembering that freedom comes from within. It's not something that you seek out there. Ultimately, it's something that's from within. Perspective on life and what you choose to focus on, and connecting to that expansiveness within. If you calculated number 6 is the caregiver, the responsible caregiver. And the strengths include being very nurturing, supportive, loving, responsible, compassionate. Though when there's an imbalance, there can be the tendency to be a little bossy, critical, interfering, self-sacrificing, and gullible. One of the biggest lessons for those with the number 6 in their chart, especially as the core energy, is balancing the giving and receiving. Sometimes there's the tendency to overgive and just look after everyone else. And having that balance and remembering self-care is so, so important. If you calculated number 7 is the truth seeker. And strengths include being incredibly intelligent, thorough, have that desire to connect with the spiritual side of life, wanting to investigate and research and learn, very studious, really exploring what life is about and that deeper truth. Now, when this is out of balance, there can be the tendency to be secretive, cynical, perfectionist, introverted, and pessimistic. One of the lessons here is to learn the balance between the human and the being, the material and the spiritual, not to get too caught up in all of the spiritual, non-physical side of life, but then also not to be so focused or avoiding the deeper truths of life and what threads everything and everyone together. So finding that balance and remembering that human beings are both the human side and the being side, and opening up the mindset and just exploring without any specific definitions on what things are or how things need to be or what other people should be focused on. Like, what's your truth? Your truth. If you calculated number 8 is the business-minded leader. And people who have number 8, they can be, when in balance, can be incredibly organized, driven, entrepreneurial, self-motivated, and generous. The shadow side of that is sometimes there can be the tendency to be a little domineering, manipulative, materialistic, forceful, forcing your ideas or weighs onto other people. Or also poverty conscious, focusing on the lack and what's missing. One of the biggest lessons here for those who have number 8 is to focus on what you want, not what you don't want. To really have that as a clear focus. This is what I want, and this is what I want to create, and this is what I want to bring about in my life, and this is what I currently have, and focus on the abundance rather than the lack. Number 8 people are incredibly good manifestors. So whether you're focusing on something that's negative or positive, it's very easy to manifest that. So it's important to really focus on what you want. And no shame if there are moments where you are focused on the negative. That's totally fine and totally human of you. It's just noticing overall, where do you want your focus to be? And number 9, if you calculated number 9, that's the humanitarian. And the strengths include being very compassionate, generous, broad-minded, and a global thinker, like really thinking about humanity, being this humanitarian, wanting to help and serve others, to be of service. When out of balance, there can be the tendency to be unforgiving, revengeful, defensive, idealistic, and melodramatic, to really have big, strong ideals where perhaps sometimes they're a little unrealistic, or to hold on to the past too much and not move on forward. Now, one of the biggest lessons here for those who have number 9 is to really remember that you are part of humanity too. Sometimes there's the focus too much on others and wanting to serve humanity and do things for others. So this is very similar to the number 6. And it's remembering that you are part of humanity too. And it's important to listen to your heart and give to yourself also. Now, if you calculated a master number 11, 22, 33, so on, then use the same list for any of the previous numbers that I used according to what number you have. So for example, number 11, usually we don't sum it down, though in this instance, you can add 1 plus 1, that will become 2. So some of the strengths and weaknesses of number 2 will be the same for number 11. If you calculated 22, then 2 plus 2 equals 4. Some of the strengths and weaknesses of number 4 will be relevant to those who have 22. Obviously, this is just a general insight. If you want something more in depth, I do recommend having your personal blueprint, your personal birth chart done for you. I do one-on-one sessions with clients and we go through so many things in the birth chart. We uncover different directions and plans and cycles and phases, like what you're here to do, what your soul wants to accomplish in this lifetime, what you've come here to learn, your way of expressing your deeper heart desire, any other strengths and weaknesses, what's coming up also, and different phases and cycles with their accompanying challenges as well, like what you're learning at different stages of your life. This can be really insightful because sometimes we go through big things in life and that can have an impact on how we live our life, and there can be certain challenges that come up, certain lessons to learn, and it can be really interesting because this comes up in the chart. We can actually see what happened at particular times of our life and what the lesson was and how to move on from that. So if you're interested in learning more about this, then just get in touch, info@emmabradford.net, and you can send me an email and we can discuss further about uncovering your personal blueprint according to the sacred science of numbers. So I found this incredibly useful personally because when I went through my number and I was able to uncover those strengths and weaknesses, and it was like, oh, okay, yes, that's a strength that perhaps I overlooked because for me, it was easy. And I assumed that everyone else found it easy, though it actually turned out to be a strength of mine. And then also some of the weaknesses that can be an indication. If I notice that behavior popping up or that tendency popping up, it gives me an insight. Okay, time to come back to balance, time to reconnect to who I truly am and to really live life according to the highest expression of who I am. So if you found this useful, if you found this interesting, please do send it to a loved one. Every single share makes such a difference. Thank you so much. And if you want to make a donation, you can find the link in the description. So there's a PayPal link there, and feel free to make a donation. This is completely optional, though it really helps to keep this podcast going because these podcast episodes are not free to produce. I do create them and produce them out of my own money and time and energy. And I do this for free because I believe that these episodes are useful for people to listen to and learn from. Though if you wish to support this in continuing, then please do make a donation. That would be much appreciated. So thank you so much. And until the next episode, sending much love. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, beautiful. You're amazing. All resources and links can be found on my website, www.emmabradford.net. Link is in the show description. Do come and join my community and share your takeaways from this episode. I'd really love to hear. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, I wonder, what magic will you experience in life today?